I have a quick question for you. If you were forced to name, say, the single most famous artist of the 20th century, who instantly comes to mind?
Oh, that's easy.
Right. The odds are overwhelming that you immediately pictured Pablo Picasso. I mean, his name is practically synonymous with the very concept of modern art. But here's a completely different question for you, and it's kind of the whole reason we're doing today's deep dive into our source material. Do you know if he was actually a good person?
And that right there is the question that changes the entire lens through which we view his legacy. It sits at the absolute center of the historical accounts and the notes we are unpacking today for you. Because the paintings themselves are undeniably extraordinary. They literally change the way human beings see the world. But the man holding the brush,
Yep.
he's easily one of the most fascinating, infuriating, and morally complicated figures in recorded history.
So, welcome to the art class. The mission for this deep dive is to ask you to hold two completely conflicting truths in your mind at the exact same time. On one side, we have the world-changing genius of his art, which totally redefined culture. And on the other side, we have the deeply destructive reality of the man himself. A man who left this massive wake of human devastation behind him.
Exactly. And to even begin grappling with those destructive elements of his character, you first have to understand the sheer magnitude of his genius. We cannot view him as some struggling artist who slowly found his way through decades of quiet trial and error, hoping for a break.
Not at all.
No. He operated on a completely different plane of existence from the very beginning of his life.
I was going through the historical accounts of his early years, and there is this one moment from his childhood that almost reads like mythology. I mean, it doesn't even sound real. So Pablo Ruiz Picasso was born in Spain in 1881. His father was a professional art teacher.
A man who had dedicated his entire life to the craft.
Right, a true professional. And by the time Pablo was just 13 years old, his father watched him paint, looked at the canvas, and then physically handed his own paintbrushes to his 13-year-old son. He declared, right then and there, that he was entirely done. He vowed never to paint again because his young son had already eclipsed a lifetime of his own professional training.
Consider the psychological weight of that moment for a 13-year-old boy.
I can't even imagine.
It tells you everything you need to know about his lifelong trajectory and frankly, his ego. He didn't just have talent, he experienced an arrival. He arrived fully formed, validated by the ultimate authority figure in his life, stepping aside in pure defeat. And the momentum from that moment built with terrifying speed.
Yeah, terrifying is the right word.
By the time he was 19, it's the year 1900, and he is relocated to Paris. And Paris at the turn of the century wasn't just a city, it was the undisputed epicenter of the global art world.
The place to be.
Absolutely. And he didn't show up to politely join the local scene or learn from the masters. He walked into the center of the culture and completely shattered the foundations of Western art.
He shattered it by inventing Cubism. And the genius of Cubism isn't found in dense academic theory. It's found in his brazen rejection of a single perspective. For centuries, a painting was essentially a photograph before cameras existed, right?
Right, it's strict representation.
It showed a subject from one fixed angle, frozen in one specific fraction of a second. But Picasso asked a completely different question. He asked, what if we show everything at once? He decided to paint subjects from every possible angle, capturing a multitude of passing emotions, all colliding simultaneously on one flat canvas.
Which is why it resonated so deeply with the public. It wasn't just some technical flex or an intellectual exercise in geometry. It felt emotionally true to the human experience.
The most striking way the sources describe this concept is to think about how you experience looking at someone you truly love.
I love this analogy.
It's so good. You don't just see them as a static, two-dimensional image. When you look at them, you see their past, you see their present, you see their quirks, their moods, the way they looked yesterday, the way they might look tomorrow. You perceive everything about them simultaneously. It's chaotic and overwhelming, but it is an entirely accurate representation of reality.
And that profound emotional resonance is what catapulted him to a level of fame that is, frankly, hard to comprehend today. Because he captured that chaos so perfectly, by the time he was 30 years old, he essentially owned the Paris art scene. By the time he was 40, he owned the world.
And when you own the world, you begin to live in a reality that just doesn't apply to anyone else. And the source material highlights this bizarre, almost absurd detail about his adult life that perfectly illustrates this reality distortion field he lived in. He almost never paid for anything in cash.
It sounds like an urban legend, doesn't it? But the historical record shows it started early in his career and became a lifelong habit.
Picture this. Imagine sitting in a crowded Parisian restaurant in the 1930s. Picasso walks in, holding court with a massive entourage of friends, fellow artists, hangers-on. They totally command the room. They eat the best food, they drink the best wine, and they rack up an incredibly expensive bill over the course of several hours.
As one does when you're the king of Paris.
Exactly. But when the exhausted owner finally brings the check over to the table, Picasso doesn't even reach for a wallet. He simply pulls out a pen, quickly draws a sketch on a paper napkin or tears a rough page out of his notebook, hands the doodle to the owner, and walks out into the night.
And the incredible thing is, the owners accepted it without question. They knew exactly what was happening.
Because it was worth more.
Oh, infinitely more. A paper napkin with a 30-second doodle from the hand of Pablo Picasso was worth so much more than whatever that dinner cost. He traded in his own personal magnetism, his favors, and his casual sketches to pay for rent, for lavish meals, for extravagant gifts. He was simultaneously extraordinarily generous with his actual artwork and profoundly unwilling to participate in normal financial transactions.
Now, you might hear that and think, oh, it was a survival tactic, like he's a starving artist. But the financial records in the sources paint a drastically different picture. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at over $1 billion, adjusted for 1973 money. $1 billion in hidden wealth, properties, and hoarded art.
Which reveals the immense scale of his ego. He didn't lack the funds to pay for a meal. He operated on an entirely different economy of his own making. He simply decided that the currency of being Picasso was unequivocally worth more than whatever mundane currency the rest of the world was asking of him.
But that absolute reality-bending control he exerted over restaurant owners and art dealers, it didn't stop at the restaurant door.
No, it did not.
It bled directly into his home life, where that exact same possessive ego had a devastating human cost. We have to look closely at the 7 most significant romantic relationships in his life.
The historical record here is bleak. It requires us to slow down and view the collateral damage impartially. Of those 7 significant women who shared his life, 2 tragically died by suicide. 2 others suffered catastrophic mental breakdowns.
It's just awful.
And the psychological toll extended across generations. His own grandson also took his life, reportedly crushed by the impossibly heavy, toxic legacy of the Picasso name.
That is a staggering concentration of tragedy surrounding one single person. I mean, the accounts we're looking through describe his magnetism as having an inescapable gravitational pull. He could lock eyes with you and make you feel as though you were the absolute center of the universe.
He possessed the terrifying ability to be entirely consuming. But he was also deeply controlling. And the true cruelty lay in his ability to completely shut off that affection in an instant. When he decided a relationship was over, it ended entirely on his terms, often leaving the other person completely adrift, stripped of their identity, and isolated from the world he had pulled them into.
There is a quote attributed to him in the biographical notes that really encapsulates this worldview. Historians occasionally debate the exact phrasing, but the people who survived his inner circle agreed it perfectly reflected his operating philosophy. He supposedly stated, "For me, there are only 2 kinds of women goddesses and doormats."
That dichotomy introduces the ultimate paradox that you, as a viewer of his art, have to grapple with. The women he so casually categorized, controlled, and destroyed were the very same women who inspired his absolute greatest masterpieces.
If you stand at a museum and look at Weeping Woman, one of his most famous anguished portraits, you are looking at Dora Maar. If you look at the luminous, tender, breathtaking paintings from the early 1930s, you are looking at Marie-Thérèse Walter.
He loved them through his own possessive, distorted lens, and he broke them. Both of those conflicting truths exist simultaneously. They are immortalized as literal goddesses on the canvas, suspended in time for millions of people to admire, while being subjected to immense psychological cruelty in their daily reality. It forces the viewer to sit with an incredible tension when standing in front of something so beautiful born from something so destructive.
That tension, his need to control and respond to the world strictly on his own terms, eventually scaled up from his personal life to the geopolitical stage. Which brings us to what is widely considered his most important work, Guernica.
Yes.
To truly see this painting, you have to understand the historical catalyst that forced it into existence. The date is April 26, 1937. The Spanish Civil War is tearing his home country apart. At the explicit request of Francisco Franco's nationalist forces, the Nazi German Air Force targets a civilian Basque town called Guernica. It was a market day. The town was packed with innocent civilians when the bombs began falling from the sky, massacring hundreds of people in a matter of hours.
While this atrocity was unfolding, Picasso was safely in Paris. He was actually struggling with a commission at the time, pacing his studio, trying to find a subject for a massive mural for the Spanish pavilion at the upcoming World's Fair. When the news of the Guernica bombing reached him, the frustration vanished, replaced by an absolute singular focus.
He just pivoted completely.
Entirely. He channeled all of his outrage into the canvas, working at a feverish, obsessive pace for just 5 weeks to create a mural of staggering proportions. The physical effort alone is astounding. The painting is 11 feet tall and nearly 26 feet wide.
And when you finally see it in person, or even study a high-quality reproduction, the most shocking detail isn't just the scale or the distorted, agonizing figures, it's the palette. The entire massive canvas is executed entirely in stark black, white, and gray. For an artist who was a legendary master of color, to abandon it entirely on his most important commission is a profound choice.
He stripped away the color because he wanted the painting to immediately evoke the texture and urgency of a newspaper photograph. Remember, the bombing was breaking news, filtering out to the world through black and white newsprint.
That makes so much sense.
By restricting his palette, he was signaling to the viewer that this wasn't mere art meant to be passively admired for its aesthetic beauty. This was hard, undeniable documentation of a massacre. He invented a visual language for modern suffering that demanded the world bear witness.
And he wielded that documentation like a weapon. After the World's Fair, Picasso engaged in a massive political standoff regarding the painting's permanent home. He explicitly and legally refused to let Guernica return to his native Spain until liberty and democracy were fully restored to the country.
That stipulation forced the painting into a long exile, mirroring his own. It was housed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York for decades, serving as a constant, glaring reminder of the ongoing regime in Spain. Franco finally died in 1975, and Spain slowly began its turbulent transition back to a democracy. Finally, in 1981, Guernica was flown to Madrid.
But that was 8 years after Picasso's own death, meaning he never lived to see his masterpiece go home.
No, he didn't. But his unyielding conditions were ultimately met. He dictated the terms of a nation's cultural heritage from his grave.
His drive, his ego, his political stubbornness, his absolute need to create was a relentless engine. He painted right up until he died at the age of 91. The sheer volume of his output is almost incomprehensible. The archival sources estimate he produced around 20,000 works across multiple mediums: paintings, sculptures, ceramics, prints, stage designs. It is a level of productivity that outpaces almost any other artist in human history.
Synthesizing the stack of sources we've explored today leaves us staring down a massive, unavoidable legacy. There is simply no modern art without Pablo Picasso. You don't get the pop art of Andy Warhol, you don't get the frantic energy of Jean-Michel Basquiat, you don't get the contemporary gallery landscape as it exists today without Picasso taking a sledgehammer to the rules first. That is an undeniable historical fact. But the immense harm he caused the people who loved him, the psychological toll, the cruelty, the lives extinguished in his wake, that is an equally undeniable fact.
He never paid for anything, but the people around him paid for everything.
That is the heavy, inescapable truth of his life.
I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The material in these sources is emotionally heavy, and we are unpacking it together because it is perfectly okay and honestly necessary to feel profoundly conflicted the next time you walk through a museum. You don't have to choose between being moved by the art and being horrified by the artist. You can hold both truths.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final brilliant detail from the source material to mull over on your own. It's a hidden layer within Guernica that we didn't touch on during the main discussion. If you look closely at the far left side of that massive mural, you will see the agonizing, distorted figure of a screaming mother holding the limp body of her dead child. When Picasso drafted that specific figure, he was making a direct, intentional visual reference to Michelangelo's Pietà, the iconic Renaissance sculpture of the Virgin Mary holding the dead body of Jesus.
Taking the ultimate classical symbol of holy divine suffering and intentionally twisting it to reflect the godless, dark, brutal reality of modern warfare.
Exactly. It's a haunting subversion of art history itself. It leaves you with a question. The next time you stand in front of a modern masterpiece, what ancient ghosts might you find hiding in the paint?
Keep questioning the stories behind the things you admire. Keep looking closer at the canvas, and we will see you on the next deep dive.